Victory in Europe seemed imminent in the summer of 1944. Despite heavy losses during the invasion of Normandy and heavy fighting throughout France, the Allies steadily advanced towards Germany. By the end of August, Allied troops marched under the Arc de Triomphe once again, liberating Paris after 4 years of Nazi control. Many soldiers were optimistic the war would be over by Christmas. A few short months later, however, that optimism was shredded by 250,000 fresh troops trained in secret on the other side of the Siegfried Line.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Nobody was ready. We didn't know a thing was going on. We had no idea. The thing was diving over on top. I didn't know what that zero, that rising sun would mean.
The guy who did something to save a buddy's life, that's a real hero. He's the only real hero.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. Hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
Before I could turn around, all hell broke loose. It was flashes of fire all over. I thought we had been hit directly.
I never heard anything. When I come to, I was halfway back to the hospital. Well, I was told that there was still another job that was up there.
Almighty God, our sons, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity.
Anybody said that he went in war, he wasn't afraid, it's not true. Anybody was afraid. Don't know if he was going to make it or not.
You don't think about killing, you don't think about dying, you don't think about your friend getting killed. Everything is a mystery. They teach you how to kill, but they don't teach you anything else after you come out. You don't know what to do.
He was just a rookie trooper and he surely shook with pride. He checked all his equipment and made sure his pack was tied. He had to sit and listen to those awful engines roar. You ain't gonna jump no more. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Airborne Infantry was a cutting-edge military theory at the outset of World War II. Never before had it been possible for thousands of soldiers to jump out of airplanes or gliders hundreds of miles behind enemy territory and attack from within. Paratroopers and glider troopers prided themselves on being the best trained and most professional outfits in the Army. This pride was well earned on battlefields all over Europe by units such as the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more. Zoom, 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 zoom.
I got drafted in November 1942, and I took my basic training in Camp Roberts, California. From there, we were shipped down to Fort Meade, South Dakota. Then we left from there. We went to Fort Bragg. I stayed there about 2-3 weeks, and we boarded the ship the last part of May. And we shipped over to in Europe. We landed in England, in Southampton at the last part of May. And I got overseas, I said about 3 days or 4 days before the invasion of France. And I stayed in England, we stayed in England a while, I said about 5 or 6 days. Then they shipped us to France. We went to St. Louis. We stayed there until August. Then from there, they brought us back to England to regroup with the 101st Airborne Division.
On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched what was at the time the largest amphibious assault in history. Over 100,000 troops charged the beaches of Normandy and secured the Allies' permanent foothold on the European continent. The night before, amid heavy anti-aircraft fire and very low visibility, troopers from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions dropped behind German lines. Their objective was simple: support the troops landing on the beach. After days of brutal fighting, the beaches of Normandy were finally secured. The next objective for the Allied Army was to liberate Paris and re-establish a French government. By the end of August 1944, the Allies once again marched the Champs-Élysées. The armies continued to push to free the rest of France and end the war by Christmas. The 101st and 82nd were pulled out of France and sent back to England to train for a large airborne exercise. The invasion of Holland in September of 1944 was an attempt to expel the Nazis from the Low Countries and push the Western Front back to the Siegfried Line.
We flew over the ship channel, France, and we flew over Belgium. We landed in the far corner of Holland, between Eindhoven and Nijmegen. The C-47 pulled us from England. They pulled us. And they pulled us up to Holland. And when we got to Holland, we cut loose, you see. I don't know who would have took over if the pilot would have got killed. I guess they had one of the soldiers sitting next to him, you know. He didn't have no training. We'd have probably got all killed. I was sitting way in the back, way in the back. I almost got shot in the hip right here. Just a ACAC bullet just missed me. I seen enough airplane in the sky that you couldn't see the sky. Gliders, they had a lot of gliders. We landed on a plowed field at 90 miles an hour. So everybody, you know, we had to regroup together. They had a door, you just push the door open, you run out the gliders. That's all you do. I was prepared, but I was afraid. Everybody was afraid. You know what was going to happen. Well, they told us, well, some of them are going to make it, and some of them not going to make it. I thought I was going to go kick them, that's all. I didn't expect it to be hard like that. We landed in glide on a plowed field at 90 miles an hour with the nose down. Nobody got hurt. Some of them landed in haystack, some of them landed in ditches, some of them landed in barbed wire fences. They landed whatever they could, you know. But some of them got killed. Well, we regrouped and we started firing at the Germans and all that. Then they started firing at us. I got scared. There's nothing you can do about it, that's all. I dove in a hole one night and they were shooting at us, and I jumped in it had some man mess in it, you know. I was all messed up in the front, so I wiped myself with some dry grass. So I kept my suit on from September until December, same suit.
General Dwight D Eisenhower and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery posted a wager in 1944. Eisenhower bet Montgomery £5 the war would be over by Christmas. When the invasion of Holland failed, Montgomery's collection of the wager seemed inevitable. Eisenhower remained optimistic, however, and Allied troops continued to drive across the French countryside toward the fatherland. Adolf Hitler, however, had no intentions of simply allowing the intruders into his homeland. In the summer of 1944, while the Allies celebrated victories in France, the Führer met with his top advisors in secret and planned one last blitzkrieg through the Ardennes forest near the Belgian border. The Germans trained in secret, and by Christmas, instead of celebrating victory, America was engaged in one of the largest battles of the Second World War. The Ardennes is a dense forest located primarily on the eastern sides of Belgium and Luxembourg. Adolf Hitler had much military success attacking through the forest when he first invaded France and was determined to follow suit in the winter of 1944. The attack came suddenly on December 16th as 250,000 German troops rushed out of the forest in Belgium, taking the Americans and locals completely by surprise. In a style reminiscent of previous years, the Nazis advanced quickly and efficiently, pushing the Americans back into Belgium. The 101st Airborne Division had recently been given a much-needed 3-day liberty in Paris when the Nazis broke through. Their leave was instantly canceled, and the entire division was sent to a small but vital crossroads town named Bastogne. They were cut off, cold, and surrounded, but they withstood every Nazi attack during a brutal 9-day siege.
I got a 3-day pass to go to Paris. So while I was in Paris, that's why the Germans broke in Bastogne, you know. So me and some other guy was trying to get away from it, so the RMP caught us and they brought us back. We got down trucks. They brought us on trucks over there. We went right down the front line. After they drop you off, them truck drivers, they take off. Oh, it was cold. It was very cold. It was foggy. For 3 or 4 days, nothing was moving. It was miserable. It was miserable. You think about home and all that, you know. You see, where I live at, they had a railroad track down there. They had a railroad bridge, you know. Half of the time, it looked like I'd see the bridge. Think about all that. Think about your family and all, you know. Don't know if you was going to make it or not. The first shell they shot, it shot right next to the first guy on the end. It killed him. It knocked the barber's arm off. It knocked me down. So the guy that they killed, he had been in Africa and he had been in Italy and all that. You see, when they call, sometimes they call it a short run, you know. You don't know where it's going to end at. Nothing but pine trees. That's all they had. And they were shooting through inside the pine trees, you know, with artillery, you see. And the first shell, you try to duck and miss it, hope it wouldn't hit you. That's what you'd hope. It was something like in the movie, you try to get out, you know, get in a foxhole or something, you know, where you wouldn't get hit. I had a lot of ammunition on me. I threw some away. It was too heavy. I couldn't go no more. It's a mistake I made, you know. Everybody had done the same thing. One night we walked all night long. It was in one place. We had to go and regroup another outfit. We walked all night long. We got there at daybreak. So me and this other guy was in a foxhole. You'd doze off a while and he'd watch a while. So we shot all night long. Got up the next day, we had killed a bunch of goats.
Major General Maxwell Taylor was given command of the 101st Airborne earlier in 1944. He was, however, absent when his division moved into Bastogne that December. Brigadier General A.C. McAuliffe was looked upon to lead the division during its toughest and most famous fight. On December 21st, after all attacks on American positions failed, General Heinrich von Luttwitz sent a letter to McAuliffe demanding the U.S. surrender of Bastogne. McAuliffe sent a short but firm answer via Colonel Joseph Harper of the 327th Glider Infantry. To the German commander, nuts, the American commander.
The German general didn't understood what he meant by nuts. So after they went back, the whole fire, everything broke loose again. The Germans burned the whole town of Bastogne. Sometimes you'd get shot, sometimes you'd get quiet. You didn't get shot at it constantly.
Infamous U.S. General George S. Patton met with Eisenhower and other senior Allied generals and argued how to best relieve the battered 101st. Patton volunteered to move his army and relieve the division by Christmas. Though Eisenhower and others were skeptical of Patton's optimistic claim, he allowed the short-tempered general to act. Within a few short days, Patton engaged his Third Army and broke the siege on the city. The 101st was pulled from Bastogne and spread across the front, poised to retake other towns along the German lines.
I jumped in a foxhole. They had 3 Americans killed in a foxhole. Anybody said that he went in war, he wasn't afraid, it's not true. Anybody that goes was afraid. Anybody. It's your first experience, you know. It feels funny to get shot at. Feels funny. After the fog lifted up, that's why we start pushing and the Germans start backing up across the Rhine River. I didn't get to cross the Rhine River. While I was there, I got frozen feet. I got 20% from my right feet disabled and 20% in my left feet disabled. They shipped me in a meat, we call that meat wagon, ambulance. I stayed 3 days in Paris. Then from there, they shipped me to Manchester, England, in a hospital. I stayed about 2 months, 2 or 3 months. And then I came back to France at Reims, and I stayed there about a week. Then I regrouped with my outfit back in Birch's Garden down there.
The Ardennes Offensive, more commonly called the Battle of the Bulge, ended in late January of 1945. The fight was costly for both sides, but in the end, the Allies stopped the German advancement and managed to push the Nazis back across the Siegfried Line. The long, brutal battle took over 100,000 casualties, almost 20,000 of which were American fatalities. The cost of defeat was too much for the ailing Nazi army, however, and their failure in the Ardennes forest marked the beginning of the end of the Third Reich. Berchtesgaden, in Lower Bavaria near the Austrian border, was the symbolic capital of the Nazi regime. One had to be a member of the Nazi Party in order to live in the mountain paradise. In 1933, Hitler purchased a home in the scenic village, which was dubbed the Eagle's Nest by American soldiers. After the 3rd Infantry Division secured the area and Hitler's holiday home, the 101st Airborne moved in and occupied the town.
Oh, it's a beautiful place. It was the SS troop camp down there. And in the valley, they had a valley. That's why they had all the airplanes in on the base. And that's why all the other outfit would come on 1 or 2 day pass, and they'd come down and leave, and they'd ride the gliders and all that. I'd ride almost every time they come down. You weren't supposed to have about 13 men. But I'd hang on in the back of the glider and ride on away. We stayed about 2 months, and then from there we went to Austria. Stayed in Austria about a month, and from there, after we left Austria, we went to France again. We stayed in France, I said about 2 or 3 months in France, and then we boarded a train, and that's why I went to board the ship in France to come back home.
On April 30th, 1945, in a bunker in Germany, Adolf Hitler took his own life. Just over a week later, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the new leader of the Nazi regime, surrendered unconditionally to the Allies. The war in Europe was finally over on May 8th, 1945, at a cost of millions of military and civilian lives.
We was getting ready to train to go to the Pacific. I came close staying in. They would give you so much money, and they'd give you so many days off, and you'd come back, and when you come back, go back to Germany. Then they had a parade in New York. The 101st had a parade in New York. So what I done, I didn't want to go back, so I got discharged in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. But if I'd have known the way it was when I came back home, they had no work, no nothing, I'd have stayed in, you know. But I wanted to volunteer, go back in. My mother didn't want me to go back in. Friends, they're hard to forget, you know. Other mother, you're like a family, you know. You're like a family. You're like a family. After you leave, everybody cry. Everybody cry. They know you're not going to see no more, you know. You're very, very close together. Very close together. I cried myself. I cried when I left, and I cried when the other guys left. I cried. A lot of time I think about it. A lot of time I pass in my book, and I look at my book and I think about them, you know. A lot of time. But what it is, during your lifetime, you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know. War is no fun. War is hell, you know. Everybody gets shot at, and sometimes you lose some of your best friends. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Japan's surrender in the summer of 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union occupied the Korean peninsula to oversee the end of Japan's 35-year reign over the small Asian country. The conquering superpowers drew a line of separation along the 38th parallel, establishing a divided Korea. The North, under Soviet control, became a communist state, while the American-controlled South remained democratic. A few short years later, on June 25, 1950, the North, determined to reunite the peninsula, dragged the war-weary Koreans into another bloody conflict.
December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Nobody was ready. We didn't know a thing was going on. We had no idea. The thing was diving over on top. I didn't know where that zero, that rising sun would meet.
The guy who did something to save a buddy's life. That's a real hero. He's the only real hero.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. Hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
Before I could turn around, all hell broke loose. It was flashes of fire all over. I thought we had been hit directly.
I never heard anything. When I come to, I was halfway back to the hospital. Well, I was told that there was still another job that was up there.
Almighty God, our sons, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity.
Anybody said that he went in war, he wasn't afraid, it's not true. Anybody that was afraid. Don't know if he was going to make it or not.
You don't think about killing, you don't think about dying, you don't think about your friend getting killed. Everything is a mystery. They teach you how to kill, but they don't teach you anything else after you come out. You don't know what to do.
There was no doubting the Korean sentiment of the occupying forces of the Americans and the Soviets. Neither side was overly welcome in a country plagued by war for almost 4 decades. The North, under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, acquired obsolete weapons from their Soviet backers and threatened to reunite the peninsula with or without the American presence below the 38th parallel. The North attacked on June 25, 1950, less than 5 years after the Japanese had left following World War II. The outnumbered Americans could not stop the advance, and within a few months, the Communists controlled almost all the Korean peninsula.
I always wanted to be first in everything. I hate to be sitting on the bench or come out second in anything. It would eat me up. At work or anything I took part in, I didn't want to be second. And in school, I took part in anything that they had to offer that I could handle. Then here come the Korean War, and we were stuck in 11th grade, around the 11th grade. And then we had some very close friend that was just out of high school. And they were the first one to go to Korea. And not only that, they're the first one to get killed, and one of them still missing in action. And that, more or less, it affected everybody that was within that age limit, because they had the draft going on at that time. And I was in the 11th grade at school, and I know my card to go get registered, and not only registered, I took my physical. It's a joke about it, but I remember coming back about 2 o'clock in the morning from New Orleans, taking my physical, and there I am taking my physical for the Army to go into service, and I got punished the following day because I didn't do my homework.
In September of 1950, the American and South Korean armies finally stopped the North Korean advance well south of the capital city of Seoul. The remaining area under American control became known as the Pusan Perimeter and was quickly besieged by the North Korean army. The new United Nations quickly resolved to send troops to Korea, mostly American, in order to stop the spread of an even greater threat to the Western world: communism.
And the war was going on pretty steady. No way, no time in sight where the war was going to end soon. My uncle wanted me to join the Navy here, the Navy there, and I liked the Navy, but I wanted to join the Marine. And because of a tougher branch, and I just wanted the Marine, but my parents felt as if I would be safer in the Navy because they didn't have that fighting like on land that was going on right now. So to keep peace, and so they wouldn't be so scared of what's going on, I joined the Navy. I remember that ship was coming in the channel in San Diego, big old ship, that carrier. I used to say, boy, I'd like to be on that baby there. And you know it, but 2.5 months after, that's where I wound up at, on that same ship. And they were in there to pick up supplies, to pick up a new squadron and new men. Every time the ship would come into the United States, a lot of people would get transferred and get discharged. And you had new faces to break in and new pilots and all. And you do all of that going back to overseas. I got on the ship. We went overseas. I remember we stopped in Pearl Harbor and spent Christmas there. That was the loneliest Christmas in my life. I had some of my friends come to me at night crying. They didn't want to go home. They were homesick. And then you had to be the bouncing board. You had to put them to sleep like a bunch of babies sometime, It just, everything was such a mystery. We were going overseas, don't know what to expect. And like they were saying, you were going out there to kill your enemy you never saw. We were a task force, 77. At that time, they had a four carrier fleet. What we were doing, we were supplying the ground for attack for the force that was on land. And I know where I was in the engine room. There's no way you could have gotten out. There's something would have happened. But this, you don't tell that to your family. You tell them that you had a nice time. You went to Hawaii, had hula girls, and went to buy souvenirs. Went to Tokyo, climbed Mount Fuji or whatever. You don't tell them anything else.
Douglas MacArthur returned to the Far East to command the army fighting the communists in Korea. In a style typical of the bold general, MacArthur ordered an amphibious landing well to the north and west of the besieged Pusan perimeter. The resulting massive charge split the North Korean army, and MacArthur quickly broke the siege on the surrounded and battered Americans in the south. Afterwards, the U.S. advanced very quickly on the north, pushing the obsolete communist army back above the 38th parallel. Not content to allow the communists to escape unpunished, MacArthur led an advance up the peninsula, pushing the north almost all the way up to the Yalu River and the Chinese border.
It's hard to brag about a war or anything else because there's no winners in a war. You can say, well, we won the war in Korea, but But what happened to 35,000 Americans? What happened to 8,000 never showed up anywhere? So is that a winning? Are you on the winning side? We kept our freedom. So, you ask yourself, why? And I regret seeing everything going on today, because 80% of our young men and women that's in the service fighting for our freedom, they're just barely teenagers. And it come back to haunt you in a way that that's why you started. You were like that. You didn't know who cares if we're killing people, if we're bombing them day and night. We're bombing them day and night. 4 carriers. And we had to wait to stop the war at the 38th parallel where the war started. And again, we never thought about killing people till, I guess, all of a sudden, the last 2-3 years, it looked like I'm still helping them to load the bombs on the planes, and then that's when you realize what this is all about. When you're young, it's true. They always told me, you don't worry about yourself. Because every day is a mystery. Every day is something new. But you're gonna do it. I guess maybe everybody is scared to lose that freedom. I've seen all kind of countries, all kind of people, no freedom to hang on to. The only thing they could hang on to is knowing that the Americans were around. And a good example is right now in Korea. We still got 35,000 Americans in there. And that's what kept those North Koreans from jumping that line again.
Mao Zedong, chairman of the Communist Party of China and leader of the People's Republic of China, saw the encroaching Americans as a constant threat against the communist regime. The day after the U.S. troops crossed the 38th parallel, Chairman Mao assembled a massive army on the Chinese-Korean border. In the fall of 1950, the Chinese sent 250,000 troops to engage the Americans approaching the Yalu River. The result was a crushing U.S. defeat, the largest retreat in American military history, and an escalation of the Korean War.
We were about 80 men in one compartment, with no air condition. All we had was about a couple of 3 8-inch vent coming in. The hatch was open, but that didn't help too much. You go to sleep with the bugler. You get up with the bugler. The way we were working, I was working 8 and 4, 8 hours off and 4 hours on watch. The watch was down in the engine room. That was about 40-somewhat feet below the sea level. If something happened, it's not as if you're going to climb out and jump in the water, because there's no water to jump. You're stuck down there. I was not scared at first, because like I said, everything was a mystery, But in boot camp, this old chief used to tell us, when I went on the ship, the first thing I wanted to do was to where I worked at, to find out how to get out. He always carried a knife. He always carried a flashlight. And then I always found out a way to get out. Sometimes you can't get out, but at least you satisfy yourself that if something should happen, you know where. I always had the feeling that if something would have happened to me, my family could have never found me. But then you grew up fast. When things were going bad in Korea, I remember we took a trip to Okinawa. We weren't able to get out. Nobody left the ship. Then we left that afternoon. And not till maybe 3 years ago, we had a ship reunion. We asked our old chief, that we had heard the scuttlebutt that we had gone to a certain time, we had gone to Okinawa and pick up the atomic bomb. He said, "Yep." He said, "It's true." And that's the reason nobody left the ship.
Douglas MacArthur was a controversial character in American military history. His colorful style and flamboyant personality was cause for both love and hate from the men who served under him. When the Chinese pushed his 8th Army back across the 38th parallel and retook Seoul for the Communists, MacArthur decided drastic measures needed to be taken. In March of 1951, when war with the Communists was finally beginning to favor the United Nations once again, President Truman sent word to MacArthur that he would try to initiate ceasefire talks with the Chinese and Koreans. MacArthur, wanting full-scale war with the Chinese and communism, was very critical of the president in the press. The general also continued to press his commander-in-chief for permission to use nuclear weapons against the North Koreans. Fearing another world war if nuclear weapons were to be used, President Truman relieved MacArthur of command in April of 1951.
You call it the Essex-class ship, about 900 feet. They had about 20 ships at that time, because every morning, your first flight in the morning is before the sun comes up. You need to make about 20 knots in the wind for those planes to take off. So if you're just messing around all night long, you're going in a circle. The fleet going nowhere but in a circle. And maybe 15 knots or so, you know. Then all of a sudden you give everybody at the same time, they give out the word to get ready for the flight. And then we start shooting them off the catapult with like slingshots.
Another famous World War II general, Dwight D Eisenhower, ran for president in the 1952 campaign. He and his running mate, future President Richard Nixon, easily defeated the Democrats and became the first Republican president and vice president in over 20 years. Part of Eisenhower's victory came out of his promise to go to Korea personally and end the conflict quickly. After the U.S. soldiers stopped the Chinese advance across the 38th parallel and managed to retake the capital of Seoul in 1951, very little territory changed hands throughout the rest of the war. Though peace talks began in the summer of 1951, fighting continued for another 2 years in such places as the Punch Bowl, Bloody Ridge, and Pork Chop Hill. After winning the presidential election in November of 1952, Eisenhower fulfilled his campaign promise and toured Korea. A ceasefire was established in July of 1953, forming a front line similar to the 38th parallel, surrounded on both sides by a demilitarized zone. No peace treaty has ever been signed, and though no shots have been fired in over 50 years, the Korean peninsula remains technically at war to this day.
So the Korean War was fought by Russian pilot. It's a fact. And the only reason we didn't, I say win, nobody won that war, is because they got about 300,000 Chinese that jumped into that war, unexpected. That's what they say about that chosen reservoir. We took a beating there. The Chinese came over the border, and we had the North Korean on the run. We had them against the Yellow River, which separates the North Korea and China. We had them on their knees, except the Chinese, it was too much for us at one time, and the war lasted longer than it was supposed to. You get to the point where your life is, you not think about your life. Look at if you're satisfied with what you did. It's a different part of life. You have to face it. You can't say, well, oh boy, cross your finger, today I made it until tomorrow, you know. You get to the point where you don't care, there's no tomorrow. My philosophy was, as long as my parents, as long as my friends, or not my friends, my family was all right. As long as my family was all right, I was all right. The life you lead in the service is the same life that you would live in civilian life. You don't think about killing, you don't think about dying, you don't think about your friend getting killed, you don't think of nothing else. You think you gotta go and you're going, and everything is a mystery. So you never knew what the damage M1 rifle could do, or any kind of ammunition, or what a grenade could do. Anything, everything was a mystery to you. And that's what I always said. They teach you how to kill, but they don't teach you anything else after you come out. You don't know what to do.